The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we're gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you who are not familiar with the A-APRP, we were actually founded in 1968 by the late, great Osafo Kwame Nkrumah, who was actually the first president of Ghana. We were founded and under the guise of Pan-Africanism, which we defined as total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. That is how we define the Pan-Africanism, which was defined in the Fifth Pan-African Congress. So today, we're actually going to be discussing, given his birthday was not too long ago, a few days ago from when this episode is being recorded, about the misconceptions and falsehoods of Marcus Garvey. But before we jump into that, I'm here with my comrade Evan, who, as you guys know, every episode we like to commemorate each and every episode to one of our ancestors. So he's going to go ahead and jump into who we're commemorating this episode to before we go ahead and dive into the topic.
And for this episode, we're going to honor Cyril Briggs and Sarah Maldoror. Cyril Briggs, if you recall, a couple episodes ago, I mentioned the co-founding of the African Blood Brotherhood by another one of our ancestors, Grace Campbell. So we'll mention the name of someone that when people usually hear about the African Blood Brotherhood, you hear about Cyril Briggs. He was born, it was now St. Kitts and Nevis. And reiterate about African Blood Brotherhood, it was a militant like nationalist, but also a socialist, revolutionary socialist organization to form a separate African state for Africans, and also Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. So a synthesis of the two. So when people think of this sort of mix of Black nationalism and revolutionary socialism or communism, a lot of people, their first thought is the Black Panther Party of self-defense, European Bobby Seale and so forth. But before that, we had the African Brotherhood. And as we talked about Garvey, is that he was a contemporary of Garvey, and while they had some disagreements about the way forward for Africans, whether focus more on the nationalist aspect of it or the part of the greater socialist, revolutionary socialist movement, that they had an idea for fighting for justice for Africans, and not only that, they also supported the fights of other oppressed nations. For example, they supported the struggle of the Irish against British colonialism, imperialism. And as far as Briggs, he and the organization folded into the Communist Party USA. And so both UNI and African Brotherhood, they had a lot of influence for later movements, Black Power and liberation, and so forth. And our second ancestor is Sarah Maldoror. She is most well known for being the filmmaker and director of Sabizanga, which is a film about the Angolan War of Independence. And the plot, the focus was mainly on right at the beginning of the Angolan struggle against Portuguese colonization. She has also worked as an assistant for the Hunter Carver film, The Battle of Algiers. And if you've been following the podcast, you know that The Battle of Algiers is one of the films that you kind of take a struggle and take a lot of import and care for. So if you want to watch both of those films, always do so. And she also, with another revolution, African filmmaker Usman Somben in Moscow in the 60s. And again, while I review their works, you can always do so. And I think one reason is not only for her portrayal of the African struggle for liberation, but also like that she transitioned to ancestors as a result of COVID. And again, we talked and mentioned in previous episodes about the intersection of like health and so forth with how there's this just a lack of care and dissociation with people, and how people been unable to get proper care, and so there's systemic issues over that. So we want to honor both of them for their contribution to the struggle. So I'll hand it back to our comrade Sadiq to talk about a topic about the misconceptions and falsehoods of Marcus Garvey. So when people hear about Marcus Garvey, what are some of the things that like people will mention right away that is like, yeah, we have to say, wait, let's slow down a bit. So let's give it some, I know it gets overused, but nuance.
Yeah,
So what are some
I
things that people use?
I think one of the main things that people say was, well, Garvey was a capitalist. You know, he hated all socialists. He hated socialism, the principles of socialism. Right? I think everything needs context too. And before we get into this episode too, let me just say this: is that I'm speaking from a clear dialectical, historical, materialist analysis. I'm not trying to mystify Garvey or any other figure. And I think, if I can speak on behalf of most of the members here in this work study circle, the Kaji circle, or even within the A-APRP, we don't look at our past revolutionary figures as some all perfect being or beings, I should say. Essentially, we understand that contradictions exist in everything and in everyone. No one is perfect. I actually am against anyone who tries to prop any figure as if they they didn't have any contradictions within their lives. That's not true. Like, there's many things all of our revolutionary figures have wrong. And if you think that, oh no, this one person I look up to or deem as like the figurehead of revolution, you probably need to do more reading and read everything out there, not just read everything that's pro or what's the word I'm looking for, I guess. Anything that is
no hagiographies.
Exactly, yeah. Biased towards your own opinions. Like you're going into it like more so just biased, like, oh yeah, like everything must be correct, so let me just read everything pro this person. Right? But one of the main misconceptions and lies that we see is, or actually more so misconception, is that Garvey was a capitalist. Like, oh yeah, he was pro-capitalism. Yeah, there's contradictions in with some of those things you may see in his writings, but overall in all, Garvey and the UIA wasn't super pro-capitalist. When you read Garvey and Garveyism, and when you read his writings, you find that he wasn't even against socialism too. Because people say like the principles of socialism he was against. He was actually against. He even said it himself. He's against the brand of socialism or socialists that was attacking the UNIA. So if anything, he was against various socialist organizations that were against the UNIA and their fight for nationalism, African nationalism, as well, because there were some Europeans who abhorred or against nationalism going on an orthodox Marxist line in relation to nationalism at that time. So they weren't for what Garvey was for. So, and then you also have the likes of Du Bois and that spat a little bit too, but a lot of that has been exacerbated by, the enemies of African people in Africa, in the African Revolution, essentially. But when you really look at things dialectically and you read and you analyze things, Garvey, all in all, wasn't a capitalist himself. Because if we define capitalism, or a capitalist is one owning and controlling the means of production, it's like Garvey didn't really fit into that category, nor the UNIA. Like, he had little small things and ventures he was doing, but it was nowhere to the likes of like a Ford or a Rockefeller or whatever, right? Where he like owned and control various entities, those things. So yeah.
I think the best way you can think of it is, even though he certainly wasn't like, even though Marcus Garvey or they didn't have this sort of, we're just gonna, like, the workers are just gonna take over the means of production, like, even though they didn't necessarily espouse that. I think the closest thing you think get to is more of a, in some ways, either a cooperative, sort of a cooperative model, or sort of like employee owns, so to say. So it wouldn't be the socialist, like, sort of like the socialist model that we think of when we talk about socialism, but it certainly wouldn't be the sort of like, we have this business owner and some shareholders who, like, a few shareholders who own all this, and then so forth. But so again, like, we're talking about nuance. I think that is to say that, hey, to think you just simply want a black Rockefeller or a black Bezos or a black something like that. I think that'd be incorrect. But again, is to make sure that we understand that he spoke. We want to make sure that, again, the focus was self-determination. That if it came more of a, maybe not a fully, like, like socialist model, but certainly a, either like a cooperative model or something like that, I think that they were like for that.
Yeah, and I think even in the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, you can see that in one of the writings he talks about, I think specifically to this, how even with that more so cooperative style, or there may be some Africans who own assets like over $1 million, but he said that no one should own, I think, assets or have attain wealth over $1 million. So it wasn't like he was for unmitigated like exploitation of African labor and resources. He had some type of, like you said like egalitarianism or like cooperative economics within it. So I guess in a way, in some avenues you could say, when you read some of his writings, that he espoused like socialist principles in a way as well. But there is contradictions there with some of the things he said, and some of the figures he may have looked up to who may have been more so capitalist. But I think all in all, when we're analyzing this thing and looking at both sides, you can't overall say that he was for, like exploiting Africa and Africans entirely in relation to the economic system he envisioned, I should say, for the African nationhood. So yeah, and then I think even when we look at a figurehead like Lenin, when he passed away, UNIA and himself commemorated Lenin and talked about all the great things and that Lenin accomplished with the revolution and so forth and so on. So I don't think he was against the principles of socialism. I think it was more so just those figures that were, bashing the UNIA or against the UNIA and their vision. So yeah, I think another big misconception that we that we often hear was that, Garvey wanted every single African in the diaspora to relocate to the continent. And I believe it was him who said that there's some Africans who do no good here and won't do good on the continent. But outside of that line, it's clear when you read Garvey and Garveyism, and even in philosophy and things, it was Marcus Garvey, that he wasn't for a mass exodus. He was for building a nation in Africa. And yes, there were some people who he believed that was going to, migrate back home or was trying to get back home, but he never stated in his writings, from my understanding, that he wanted every single African to migrate. I think in some cases he may have said, it would be in the best interest for Africans to go back home, which I believe that would be true too. But I don't think he was an idealist in saying, now we're going to get every single one back to the continent as well. So, and that's the same line as Nkrumah and Du Bois as well, who also espouse the same thing in relation to like Pan-Africanism. And I think some people will look at Pan-Africanism under that umbrella, and I think it's been misconceived over the last few years, decades, or whatever, in relation to Pan-Africanism. Oh, it just means that everyone just makes a mass exodus to the continent. That's not really what it is. I think even with that, when you go back home, I think the whole premise is to work to build an African nation, build revolution on the continent, right? To overthrow these imperialist, neo-colonial forces out there that are subjugating us and oppressing us. I think that's essentially what Garvey was for, from my understanding. So yeah.
Yeah, and to put it in words, or the way Comrade Jamil always likes to like discuss on podcasts, or just like work study, and just organizing that. So the 10-second less view is that the whole point is that not everyone can go, not everyone will go, and not everyone should go. I think that's basically the point of view of the UNI and Garvey. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Yeah, it's not gonna work for everyone. Everyone, like, we're not a monolith. Everyone isn't gonna just think the same. And I think that's another thing. I guess not to venture too much off this topic, the main topic, but Pan-Africanism isn't just some like, oh yeah, kumbaya, and we agree on every single thing. Yeah, there's going to be disagreements on various things. The same way, even within Pan-Europeanism, they disagree with things like NATO and all these institutions. They definitely have disagreements between different, power blocks or different nations. But all in all, the main principles they agree on. The same thing for Pan-Africanism. The main principles of having a sovereign continent, right, under scientific socialism is the main thing. There may be disagreements on, other things. I can't say exactly what they would be, because that's not the case of Africa right now. But there's contradictions going to exist in everything, not only in this society we're in now, but the new one that would evolve and emerge at some point in period. The contradictions are going to exist there. There's going to be different ones. It may not be the same exact ones. Or those antagonisms that was there before aren't going to exist, may not exist, maybe different antagonisms in the new society. So I think we got to be clear in understanding Pan-Africanism, the Pan-Africanist leaders and what their vision was, and not get it confused with some of the thoughts that are out there. And that can only come through studying, and we implore you to join a work study process in the A-APRP or any other organization to get that clear understanding. Or if you want to do the reading on your own as well, I always recommend reading primary sources, read the actual text and what these actual people wrote themselves and said themselves, versus trying to read stuff through memes and whatever, and then make your analysis. Or someone else told you on Twitter, or you've seen someone tweet a thread, and it's like, that's the conclusion of your analysis there, right? You got to actually like dig and research and get to the primary sources, get to the main sources of what's being said. So
exactly, yeah, it's all about being scientific about it and applying it to what like the work you're doing. Like, if you know that trying to get every single person to go to take the con will be difficult, then obviously then you have to like, okay, you have to change the way you're working, and then see how it goes. So that's sort of like the mass line. You see what the masses are asking for. You have your ideology. You have your things of what you want or what you think the issue is. They synthesize. You see how you put it out there. See how it works. If it works, great. And change anything from there. If it doesn't, then over there. And And also to go back to the point about the principle like this rejecting the principles of communism, socialism, and against the UNA. I think you see this more generally that there might be us, if not maybe not suspicion, but certainly a sort of a reluctance of the idea of like of course is forms of socialism of communism that is the idea of internationalism. Therefore, like we like all if the whole point is to have a stateless, moneyless class of society, then wait, what are we fighting for? You know, I think in that respect, when like national self-determination is taken out, I think Garvey, like other groups, might have a reluctance to that. So I think that's another point to speak about. But as you know, that there were developments as far as have synthesizing, fighting for one's nation, or like for national unity, self-determination, and the need for like proletarian or proletarian internationalism and of workers and people working together to seize means of production from these few private hands. So I think that's what we have to consider there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for us to achieve that communist state, it's going to be through scientific methods and processes that take place. It's going to happen in successions and stages. So I think for Africans, when we look at the history of various continents and places, you know, Kwame Ture always talks about this, that, you know, you go from your tribe to your nation to your continent. Obviously, we went from, you know, tribes and had nations, but we never achieved continental unity due to European, Western European invasion and the transatlantic slave trade and, you know, colonialism, so forth and so on. You know, imperialism is what deterred, you know, us from achieving continental unity. So I think we need to reach that stage before we could get to a point where we get to a stateless communist, you know, society within Africa and then throughout the world as well. But there's a lot of things that need to happen in between before we can get to that point, and then of continental unity, and then there's some more stages that need to happen before we get to the communist society as well. So, so yeah, for sure. So another misconception or misnomer, I think, as well, is the fact that people state that Garvey hated all Europeans. he didn't like any Europeans. And mind you, I just stated he commemorated Lenin, and last time I checked, you know, pretty sure he's European. But yeah, I think that's something that's misconceived. You know, Garvey and Garveyism, that's a big text I'm always big on to read, and, you know, various quotes from Garvey in there, which was written by Amy Jacques Garvey, who was Garvey's second wife. Yeah, she notes and talks about, I think there's a quote in there specifically where he talks about he doesn't hate all men. You know, he's just for Africans and us achieving our nationhood and our liberation, essentially, right? But he doesn't, you know, he's against, you know, anyone that's against Africans. So if it's European colonizers, not to condemn the whole European race, but if the ones that are mainly doing it at that time were Europeans, then yeah. And then people also got to put the context in the time is that we're dealing with a time period where it was colonialism, that's direct rule. You know, that wasn't in a time during neo-colonial rule where it's indirect rule. So you have puppet figures or figureheads that look like you, you know, maintaining a system for the elites, the mostly European bourgeoisie, right? But yeah, at that time it was Europeans. It was a clear distinction across, like, I guess, racial lines. You know, in a way, race and class was kind of embedded, where if you were African, it automatically meant that you were of a lower class for the most part. You know, you had a few elites, but not to the number that we have now, like petty bourgeois. I don't really say elites, I guess petty bourgeois Africans as well. So I think that also has to be accounted for when people say, "Oh, he hated all Europeans." It's like, no, it's and once again, he made it clear in his writing. So if you actually read Garvey and not just go off of clickbait and what you heard someone say, if you read multiple primary sources as well, you'll understand and see that he clearly made a distinguished when he said he doesn't hate any race specifically, like he doesn't make a blanket condemnation on Europeans solely.
Exactly. I think they just said sort of a tendency to say, like, any kind of if Africans express pride in themselves or pride in the nation or so forth, then you must hate you just want down whitey, or you down with the Europeans and so forth. Again, I think again you have the sort of contradiction and of what's revolutionary versus what's reactionary nationalism. That if it's against it's against the forces of colonialism and subjugation by imperialism, well, then that's a revolutionary national. Again, you talked about both Briggs and Garvey and their respective movements they were part of. As part of the Irish struggle, and because they were suppressed by British colonialism, or you read stuff from the Negro World newspaper, or other ongoing national struggles at the time. Like you talk about other nations in Africa or in Asia or in Latin America, so forth that they supported them, and again, it included Europeans fighting against I guess or the imperialists or empires at the time, and again, this kind of goes into our sort of the next sort of misconception or falsehood was that Garvey, it was maybe he didn't. He actually loved certain kind of Europeans, and they happen to have 3 Ks in there. So the KK that Garvey is somehow pro KKK, which again, as we know, it's a very blunt and very out statement that no, they weren't for pro KKK. I think at the most it's just a matter of the KKK, they're more honest about, hey, we think that the Africans here don't deserve the spoils of what the white race, what European race took from the land of the indigenous people of the United States. So I think that's the most of it. And again, since the UNA was about self-determination and pride in the race, it's over that if there happened to be some kind of confrontation between the government, that there may be some benefit to having them, but again, it was, if anything, it was a tactical thing and limited to that effect. It wasn't oh yeah, let's join these guys with the robes and so again, it takes a lot understanding the specifics of what happened.
Yeah, and I think to what you're saying, the whole meeting, the premise on why they met was KKK at that time, which is probably still true today for the most part, is that they don't want Africans here. They feel like, oh, this is our land, even though they stole this land. This isn't their land either, but they feel like this is our land, and this is a white nation. So Africans don't belong here. We already exploited the neighbor we need to exploit, and we already built the wealth off of slavery and genocide. So we don't need these Africans here. This be solely a white nation. So Garvey was for building an African nation. So that was the context to what that meeting transpired. It wasn't that he was working very closely with the KKK on various avenues and things of that nature. I believe it was just under that context of, oh, KKK hate Africans and you want to get them out of here. So like, oh, you want to get it. It's kind of the same way. I think Adamu says this all the time, where some racists would say, go back to Africa. He's like, oh yeah, you want me to go back to Africa? Help me pay for it then. So, give me the funds, give me the means of how to get there. So I would, say that was the context of when that happened. And people like to make, that as like a, oh, see, gotcha. Look, Garvey, he met with them. And so that means he was pro KKK and he really hated Africans and all the other stuff. It's like, come on, man. Once again, these are just talking about misconceptions and falsehoods. There's valid criticism of Garvey as well. There's valid criticism of every revolutionary figure. Once again, I just want to reiterate this because I know there's going to be someone who listens to this and tries to, oh, you're trying to say Garvey was perfect. Well, look, what about this? It's like, oh yeah, he was human. Oh my God, what about that? He has contradictions, like every one of us. I'm sure in your life, your personal life, even in my life, there's contradictions in my life too, and who I am as well, in all of us. So let's not try to speak from a ideological purist lens or just from a purist lens in general. Let's be dialectical, look at both sides, understand that yes, there are valid criticisms of him too, but we're just trying to, debunk a lot of those, I guess I would say FBI lines, J. Edgar Hoover lines on Garvey or misconceptions as well.
Yeah, like we know, like again, like you read the sources that there, again, with any revolution, especially if whatever they die relatively young. So Marcus Garvey died, he transitioned to the ancestors. He's 53, so he could have more time to establish some of the contradictions, like before we were discussing for this episode. We mentioned like some bits about Garvey and the view after that. Even like some contemporaries, like George Padmore, McKay, and Du Bois, that has some critiques about like sort of the view of Africa, and it's sort of a way that almost like you can tell it has. I mean, not necessarily elitism, but certainly a sort of like he looked to these work of the civilization, like the great civilizations of Africa. But it was sort of like, I think it's not solely a Garvey issue that when we talk about Africa, we have to talk about ancient Egypt, we have to talk about Abyssinia, or talk about Mali or Ghana, Songhai, or the Congo Kingdom, so forth. And yeah, there are great Zimbabwe, that there are like great things that Africa has did on a mass scale to do it for hundreds of thousands of years. But there's also greatness in some of the small, like remote places, or sort of the everyday life of people that they weren't kings, they weren't obas, they weren't regents, anything like that. They were hunter gatherers, they were maybe pastoralists or so forth, and that's as much. I think you should take as much pride from that too. And that was maybe one thing that if as one thing that we're going to talk about is that Marcus Garvey never was able to get to the African continent because the colonial forces didn't want their UNA to organize and sort of like raise ruckus, and like having copies of the Negro World or any some of his speeches was punished harshly if found out. So I think if he were able to actually step foot on the continent, then he could have developed his views in a way that may not I want to say, not necessarily patronized, but certainly in a way that it looked at the breadth of Africa in such a way that you could take the pride, that sort of like pride that the UNA was able to instill, but do so in a way that took more of the realities on the ground instead of maybe not as idealist, but again, it's something that doing that for the reading and applying it always helps, because you can't, you always have to, as we say, we always have to look at things, how they synthesize and so forth.
Yeah, man, I look at it like this. At the end of the day, any African who was able to organize 6 million Africans, whether he was able to achieve his main objective or not, is something that we need to draw from and take from and learn from. There's practicalities that we could use even today, to some extent, that he applied during his time that we could use to help organize, the same number, if not more, Africans than that. So I think that's something, the main contradiction in this whole thing with Garvey isn't, some of the misconceptions that we laid out that, are what they are misconceptions, or even the valid critiques, whatever, is the fact that the state was preventing Garvey, like they do all the other African revolutionary-led movements, from achieving their ultimate objective from, imperialism. Like J. Edgar Hoover was the same people who stopped the Black Panthers through via COINTELPRO and other, the BLA and other revolutionary movements inside the Imperial Corps in the United States. But he was the same one who stopped Garvey. That was actually one of his first missions, to get Garvey on quote unquote mail fraud and stop his movement from getting influence. And on top of everything you stated too, is the imperialist forces also making sure he can't step foot on the continent, even though his stuff was, pushed throughout the continent. I think that's another thing we should look at is his influence around the world, not only on the continent, but other places. Because, not only did he influence, figures like Kwame Nkrumah, who he learned about Garvey through someone he looked up to, someone by the name of Kwame Ture. I know I butchered that name badly, but he was a Ghanaian. Recently, reading this book by John Patash, he actually cites that Afeni Shakur, I think, has relations to someone in her family, relationship with someone in her family that is tied to the UNIA as well. Garvey's parents, were active UNIA members as well. Then outside of Africa and Africans, you can look at Ho Chi Minh, who was introduced to Garvey's works and through Robert F. Williams, so forth and so on. So, those are the things that we could draw from, those
also Malcolm X, and we got Shabazz League. It's where in the UNIA.
Yeah.
Again, they look at so many it's like some of the nationalist or international groups that they took some art from Garveyism or the UNA, or there's someone who knew someone there. So again, there's really so wide that, and I think it's unless it gets sort of underestimated. I think you have to understand wow, there's so many that had some time they were formerly in the UNA or did something with the UNA, and then they applied it elsewhere. Maybe either they kept with the nationalists or African centered, or maybe they incorporated national with the revolutionary socialism or revolutionary Black nationalism, so forth, or even if they became anarchists or African anarchists, they have some influence with Garvey as well. Again, they're some of the lessons that you take from that and go elsewhere.
Yeah, and we also draw from his actual mistakes too as well, or not just him, but the UNIA mistakes at that time, and draw from that. And okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? So forth and so on. So You know, but we definitely could take from those positive attributes because, you know, those are the ones that are more glaring, in my opinion.
And even with what. And I did like a paper about Amy Jacques Garvey and her contribution to the Negro world and our women. What they think is that they're pretty open and honest about like some of the like about the women of the UNA, to what extent they were able to have positions of authority and able to like make their contributions known. So they're pretty open about it too. So that's another thing is they make sure that not only are we learn from the mistakes of the past, but while we're doing the work that this open and honest critique is possible. And like they were doing, and that's not just like internal stuff that it was in the Negro world itself. They say like, hey, like why aren't you allowing us to like have more stuff for women? And again, like there's some contradictions there as far as like to what extent sort of like like that where they this like challenge to the man of the UNA to accept this was this doing enough to challenge patriarchy? Was it, and again, like I'll talk about that, but again, like stating the importance of having that out there that patriarchal BS has to be shut down, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's a negative aspect we want to stay away from as an organizer. You know, it's, any type of like, you know, chauvinism, in, you know, relation to gender in any way. You want to definitely stay away from that completely. If we're talking about revolution and we're talking about egalitarianism to some extent, you know, we definitely need to steer clear away from that, for sure. So yeah. Yeah, and I think I definitely implore you all. There's a great episode that our comrades did, Comrade Shamu and his daughter Shakura, on Garvey as well. I think it's one of their more recent episodes. I think it's the last one they did. Yeah, so I
looks
definitely
like it's from I think it's the beginning of this year. It was about like the conflict. Like there was, I think there might have done more. I should check, but you know, there's one where they did talk about the whole conflict between Du Bois and Garvey, and there's of course there's another like recent one as well. Again, like as we talk about talk about our comrades and so forth, and again making sure that they take the like a broad view of it. So if there's something in our episode, you say, wait, did we really say that? And you can check other episodes.
Yeah.
And then you obviously go to the works. We'll have sources. We'll have our sources in the description. But for some of Sadiq mentioned Garvey and Garveyism is great. The philosophy opinions of Marcus Garvey. There are a couple volumes of that. So just to make sure. UCLA, they have a website of the archives of like some first primary sources from Marcus Garvey and the UNA. So some Marcus Garvey Life and Lessons. Tony Martin, he's written some biographies of A-APRP Garvey as well as stuff from the UNA. So, and obviously, if we have any more, we'll put them in the description, and you can always ask if we have anything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they also have the Marcus Garvey and the UNIA Association papers, which is just like it comes in volumes, which is edited by Robert A. Hill as well, which is another great primary source. And if you're looking for, you know, some critiques, you can read, you know, Pan-Africanism or Communism by George Padmore. He heavily critiques Garvey in there. So just to kind of give you guys both sides of it as well, if you want to read, you know, that as well too. And there's some others, like kind of like what Evan said, we'll put in the description that you should definitely take a look at, and get a full understanding, full scope of Garvey and his works, sure. But yeah, definitely appreciate you guys listening to us again for another episode of the Pantsula Podcast. Like we always say in every episode, we implore each and every one of you to join an organization if you're not in one. Obviously, if you're African and you're listening and you're not in an organization, we definitely implore you to listen to, or not listen to, but join the A-APRP. If you can, if you feel like, what we said in this episode, any other episode, or whatever doesn't align with what you envision, that's fine with us. We won't take hard feelings to that. But we definitely implore you to join any organization fighting for justice, the liberation of Africa and Africans to some degree. And if you feel like there's not anyone around you, not suitable, feel free to start your own as well. It doesn't take, $1 million to do this. It doesn't take, it just takes going out, getting out in the community, getting with some friends or whatever the case is, and building it out. And if you need help with that, I'm sure, there's folks here at the A-APRP and other organizations want to help you build that as well with that.
Yep. If you live in an apartment building, if you're not sure about, I don't know if I can organize like 2 billion African. Well, if you have apartment buildings, Africans, even if they're not Africans, like organize the apartment building, organize workplace, organize. Like if you like it's like the capitalist system like prevents you from doing things because of ability or something, whatever, that organize how you can, or again, like think of those different ancestors. Not all of them have to pick up the gun to like do the work. It's important to have like a militant strategy, of course, but and like it doesn't have to be making the speech. It doesn't have to be like getting the weapons or anything. It can be like making sure that the people around them are able to eat. The people around you are able to get fed, like clothed, and they got housing. It was with some, or obviously do some stuff that we can't say on YouTube because you don't want to. We're just doing it just for research purposes. Again, but like do what you can. Like if it's just like it's like a shoulder to lean on for people, then do that or anything like that. So
yeah, and if you are a Garveyite, you're looking at the Garvey, and you want to continue the tradition. If you actually read his stuff, you see that he was all for organization. I know he had a line pretty much. This is me summarizing, it's not verbatim, but it's like, you continue to stay organized and you'll be exploited, robbed, killed, organized, and then the world will respect you, right? So if you look up to Garvey, you want to be like Garvey, join an organization, because, that's what he did. He organized about over 6 million Africans. So we're not saying that you have to do that exact same thing. Obviously, it would be great for us if you're able to do that, but start somewhere, right? And then we also implore you guys to check out our Forward Ever shop. Get you some, A-APRP merch, some revolutionary merch. This is how we fund the stuff that we do and the work, the organizing work that we do as well. So, if for any reason you're like, maybe I don't like the graphics like that, if for no other reason for that, try to support the A-APRP, cop the merch, maybe get it for some relatives, get it for some friends or something like that. But that would be a great way to help donate to our cause and help our cause.
Or if you want to help with the design, feel free.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, feel free to just follow us on Instagram, Forward Ever Shop. Once again, that's Forward, FORWARD shop. Forward Ever Shop. I'm sorry. Follow us there. Send us graphics if you feel like that's or shoot, if you want to join A-APRP, join our task force as well. To help us out with some designs, because we need more hands on deck. And then we also implore you guys to check out our other podcasts that our comrades are doing, like the For Whatever podcast on Spotify. You can also check out the A-APRP Southwest chapter YouTube every Thursday. Revolutionary African Women as well. And then, as we stated earlier, our Ancestors' Voices, which is done by our comrade Jamu and his daughter Shakura as well. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for tuning in, and catch you guys on the next episode. For whatever.
Forward.